Hey, OC friends. Today is another edition of Wade Forward, a transformative take on the news that's affecting Orange County and beyond. So thanks for coming. I want to take a moment to try and talk to thoughtful people about what Trump is going to do to our government, particularly what he's going to do to our civil service. And there are a lot of horrible things that are proposed in Project 2025 and Plan 47 and things that Trump said he's going to do. But I'm going to talk about one that's pretty concrete, but people might not understand it so much. It's called Schedule F, and I want to explain that. But before I do, I just want to talk about what people in my transgender community, including myself, are feeling and going through right now, so that our friends who voted for Trump know what they voted for. So here are just a couple of things in my world that are going on right now. A straight friend just told me that they were going to be a bodyguard for a trans friend who's going to Colorado, and the two of them together are going to help that person move out of their community and move here to California. And they need a bodyguard to help. That woman doesn't feel safe, and the trans woman coming to help her move out doesn't feel safe either. In the last 4 days, 3 different women have come to me, trans women have come to me and asked me, as if I had a crystal ball, but they want to know, like, when can they expect to lose their estrogen coverage and other aspects of their medical care? I don't know what to tell them. I have the same worries. You know, I get my medical care at VA. I know that the Trump administration is going to try and stop that. Another friend who's a U.S. citizen is really worried about her documents. She's changed all her documents and has her correct female gender and her legally changed name. And she's done all that legally, but she's afraid that retroactively they're going to make her go back to her assigned gender at birth on all her documents. And I told her, well, there's a good chance that, you know, that might be grandfathered in, but, you know, she's also worried because she thinks her mother's going to be deported and to Mexico. And, you know, as a dark-skinned Latina, she's worried about whether they change her documents or not. And she has legal documents and she's a U.S. citizen. She's wondering if she's going to be subjecting herself to harassment or, you know, all kinds of difficulties trying to cross the Mexico border. Not to mention what she's worried about is going to face her mom. Another friend of a friend, who's transgender, that woman just killed herself a week ago. And I just found that out. I have 2 friends that are on active duty in the military right now. They've been on active duty, one of them for just shy of 20 years and another for almost 15 years. They were both transgender, came out during the Obama administration when prohibition was lifted on transgender people serving. They were grandfathered in during the Trump administration and served during the Trump ban. But they really wonder, under this new proposed Secretary of Defense, if they're going to be kicked out before they get to earn their pension benefits. Pretty horrible for them. And then just last night, Representative Nancy Mace, Republican of South Carolina, came out boasting about a new bill she's proposing for this lame duck session, specifically targeted to prevent the first transgender woman ever elected, the first transgender person ever elected to Congress, Sarah McBride. Well, old Nancy Mace wants to make sure she can't use the women's room in the House, and that no transgender person, including staffers or the public, can use the women's room. And what's more, old Nancy's starting to talk about how she wants to, you know, this is only the beginning, and she wants to expand this to a national bill barring women like myself from being able to use the bathroom. What Nancy Mace is really doing, and she's not afraid of sit next to Sarah McBride in a stall in the women's room. What she wants to do is she wants to shame us and push us out of sight, to give us a choice of me going either to the men's room where I'm totally unsafe, or just not being out in public at all. Push us into a pre-Stonewall America. That's what Trump administration has in store for people like me. All right, let me turn more broadly to things that are going to affect all of us very specifically and deeply, and talk about the civil service and how Trump and the Trump administration and those who are working for him are very clear-eyed about how they want to destroy that civil service. We've had a civil service in the United States since 1871. Basically, under President Grant, we figured out it was a bad idea to allow politicians to just hire and fire whoever they want because they give jobs to political cronies who are incompetent. And we've been very well served by having a civil service where people are professionals, they're hired for their talents, and once they've passed a probationary period, they can be fired, but they can only be fired for cause, meaning you have to have a legitimate reason that you have to prove in writing, and that where they have an appeal process where if they think that the reasons they're being fired are unfair, they have an opportunity to appeal it. Well, they want to end that. They want to make virtually all civil servants at-will employees that can be fired just because their supervisor wants to fire them. And realize this arose out of the first Trump administration when, through their own incompetence and their repeated attempts to subvert federal laws, and not even just subvert, to completely defy federal laws and regulations, they became angry at the deep state, the civil servants, who told them you can't do that because it's against the law. And so what they came up with is a way to try and make all those civil servants entirely compliant for whatever dear leader Trump wants. And the boldest attempt at this, and the one that they had already started to implement, came in an executive order, 13975, that Trump signed on October 21st, 2020. Think about that date. It's in the middle of the last presidential election. In the middle of COVID, I might add, as well. And what they really wanted to do was set it up so that if and when he was reelected, right away he'd be able to start firing civil servants. The basic mechanisms of how this would work is that executive order created a new class of employees called Schedule F that would be at-will employees. And it required the head of every federal agency to submit on January 19th, the day before the 2021 presidential inauguration, when he was expecting to be inaugurated again for a second term. It stipulated that every agency head the day before the 2021 presidential inauguration had to submit a list of all the jobs that they wanted to reclassify under Schedule F, under this at-will employment status. And the loosey-goosey criteria for this allowed anybody from GS9 and above to be reclassified based on the idea that if they had any substantive participation in advocacy, development, or formulation of policy in an agency. So, how many people is that going to affect? How many? Who? It's a reasonable question, right? Well, one scholar said that 50,000 employees would be what he called the ground floor, but that it could easily go to hundreds of thousands. Well, I think it may go to more because we have a practical example of how the Trump administration tried to start this already. So remember, he signed that order in October 21st of 2020. And several of the agencies complied even before the inauguration. And for example, the Office of Management and Budget gave a list of 140 different positions. 136 were approved for reclassification. That's roughly 70% of the staff at the Office of Management and Budget. And remember that the mechanics of this were that the agency had produced a list and said, well, these people are, involved in policy in just about any way, and we think they should be subject to at-will employment so we can fire them at any time. And once they submitted that list, the only check on it was submitted to the director of the Office of Management and Personnel, and they said yes or no. So that's why 136 of the 140 that the director of the Office of Management and Budget submitted were approved, right? So there's really no check on this. This is just, we can decide whoever we want is now an at-will employee. We're going to gut the civil service. And remember how this is going to work. Remember that every manager since the beginning of time wants the ability to hire and fire at will, but especially these hyper-partisan MAGA extremists that Trump's appointing, they're all going to want to be able to hire and fire just about anybody they can. And there's really going to be no check on it. So realistically, I don't think this will become like the old Jacksonian spoils system. They're not going to, the federal workforce is approximately 2 million people. They're not going to essentially fire half of them overnight, but I bet they will reclassify almost half of the federal workforce as Schedule F. And that'll almost be enough. Like Henry VIII or the Roman army, if you want to scare people into doing what you want, you only have to cut off a few heads, put them on pikes, and everybody's going to see it. I mean, imagine the effect if you're a federal worker and you suddenly know you can be fired for no reason, save my boss doesn't like me. And you've got like 10 years into getting a pension. You took a job that didn't pay a lot, but had this one great benefit that you were expecting, I was going to get good medical care. And when I retired, I was going to have a decent benefit of a defined pension. Well, now, 10 years in, 15 years in, suddenly you can be fired for anything. Are you going to toe the Trump line on anything they want? I think a lot of people will. What I want to do now is I'm just going to take 5 specific examples. I could have done 1 or 2 or 3. I took 5 examples of jobs that would easily be reclassified as Schedule F under the president's executive order from 2020. And by the way, when Joe Biden came into office, he immediately rescinded that order. But Trump himself and Project 2025 and Plan 47 both very specifically said this is one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to reissue that Schedule F order. So here are 5 examples of kinds of lower level jobs down to the nitty gritty where the rubber meets the road, where you deal with your government. Here are 5 jobs that are likely to be reclassified. I'll start with number 1. Program specialist in the Veterans Administration that works for the Veterans Benefits Agency. These are the people that evaluate VA disability claims. They're like GS 7s through 9s. So imagine now you're a program specialist. Your job is to evaluate VA claims, and in comes a fair number of claims that say, I'm suffering from PTSD because of military sexual trauma. I was raped by my commanding officer, couldn't talk about it when I was in the military because I was afraid of retribution. But here's all this evidence that I was raped and that I was retaliated against and how it's affected me in my life. And I'm applying for disability benefits. Maybe that's not so cool with the Trump administration. They're looking to save money on VA. They've said it. And they've also said that they don't think that military sexual trauma should be something that the VA compensates. Now, maybe they can't get rid of that right away because it's a matter of law, but I bet people that are in a position to approve or disapprove those, or to approve or disapprove of those claims are going to be a little disinclined to approve them under Schedule F. Once they're reclassified, they can be fired in a minute. Let's take another one. How about our dear old FBI agents? And there's an agency that Trump has a particular issue with. They start as GS 10s. So if you're an FBI agent, do you really want to investigate white nationalists? Like there's a threat in your city, there's a cell that's being violent, and you think they've committed a murder or a beating and they're intimidating people and harassing people. Do you want to investigate that? I mean, Trump says they're good people on both sides. He says to the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. I don't know. How about white collar crime? What if it's one of Trump's crony friends on Wall Street? Do you want to investigate that insider trading? Or Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, these are well-known traders who, used their access in government and collaborated with foreign governments for pay. They got paid off, bribed. What about when Tulsi Gabbard does something like that? She's already cozy with Putin and Assad of Syria. Are you going to want to investigate her? All right, let's take number 3. How about the equal opportunity employment specialists who work at the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission? Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, excuse me. They're generally hired, an employment specialist there, an equal employment specialist there is hired as a GS-12. Do you think you'd support a gay man who was clearly fired by their manager for being gay? I mean, Trump thinks people should be able to fire people for being gay as a matter of religious conscience, right? What if turn it around. What if it's a white man who was fired ostensibly for harassing minorities in your local post office, right? Will you take that case? Especially if that, what if that white man says, hey, well, I was just telling jokes. This is my free speech. I was fired for free speech. I can tell jokes. Maybe you want to support that claim because I know that the Trump administration would like it. Let's turn our attention to meteorologists, say at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Those meteorologists are generally hired at a GS-13 level. So clearly these are the type of people that they can be reclassified quite easily as Schedule F. Will you stop climate-related research? Will you produce things that disagree with what the Trump administration wants about the climate hoax? I don't know. How about number 5? Let's look at a clinical analyst at FDA. These are that's the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. These are the people that approve or disapprove drugs based on research. They look at all the research and decide, is this drug safe and efficacious? Remember Trump and ivermectin? COVID-19, he said, take this drug. It was like not safe for people to take, but he said, no, this is a cure. Trump, like he had medical knowledge, said, this is a cure. And a bunch of his friends said, take ivermectin. When that happens again, will you stand up and point out the research, or will you just kind of be quiet, sit on your hands? Or imagine that you're sitting there with evidence about how important vaccines are to preventing herd immunity, and how, even those who take vaccines can be negatively affected if the general population isn't taking that vaccine. We need herd immunity. Are you going to want to promulgate or support that evidence when the HHS director is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and he wants to make childhood vaccinations optional? Yeah. So, this is the kind of everyday stuff that they've already clearly tried once, that they're now going to try again, and they're going to have, instead of having 2 months to do it, they're going to have 4 years. And unless the courts intervene, and that's unclear, they're going to do this. And it's going to make your water less safe to drink, your air less safe to breathe. It's going to make you less equal as a citizen, and it's going to make you the target of whoever Trump, it's going to make people, whoever Trump wants to target, the victims of government rather than the recipients of government services. Oh, great.